People who work in the wedding/marriage industry, what is the craziest drama you've experienced at a wedding? My college girlfriend worked at a botanical garden and heard this story at a wedding industry networking event. Some non-members of a country club rented the party room for their wedding. You apparently could walk through the party room to get to the pool, or you could walk an extra 10 steps to get there by going outside. It was summer, so the pool was open. The wedding posted some people at the door of the party room so when someone would try to cut through, they would be redirected outside. Most people took this with grace and offered congratulations, except for one very intoxicated man. He was pissed he couldn't cut through, but also that those people weren't members and were using his country club. He started to raise a big stink, to the point where the bride's brothers go over to talk to him. We are so excited for our sister and are sorry we are making this inconvenient, but would you mind just taking the outdoor path? And the like. Eventually the mother of the bride goes over and talks to the guy as well. He's unrelenting. He pays his dues and as such should be allowed to walk through this party room to the pool. While he's talking to the mother, a beer bottle comes flying through the air and drills him in the side of the head. Everyone turns to see the bride, having thrown the bottle, screaming, "You're ruining my fucking wedding," over and over again. Don't work in the industry, but attended a wedding where this happened. My coworker was having her wedding on a public beach in Southern California. They weren't able to reserve anything, just make do with it the best that they could. Well, right before she was due to walk down the aisle, a homeless man stumbles into the group of people guests and passes out midway into the aisle. A couple of guys go over to get him to move, but the dude wasn't waking up. Ended up giving him CPR for a solid 20 minutes while waiting for the ambulance. Didn't hear anything else about him after they carried him off the beach. TL. Doctor, homeless man died in the middle of my coworker's wedding. I worked in a hotel in a smallish town, which was one of the only venues to get married around, and a popular venue in general. I've got loads of stories, but a few that stick out. A wedding came in from out of town. The bride/groom hadn't had a stag/hen do, so decided the night before that the men and woman would split up and each have their own party. The men had a small cocktail bar and the women took the restaurant. I was meant to be working the main bar, but got asked by a female colleague to cover the cocktail bar as the men were getting rowdy and making comments. No problem. Got in there, and it's just a group of old mates getting hammered. Pretty standard stuff, until the stripper arrived. She did a full show. The groom has to remove her underwear with his teeth, had to lick cream off her nipples, etc. All was well until the women found out and called off the wedding. Shouting matches went on well into the early hours. The wedding did go ahead, but you could tell there was awkwardness in the air. The bride came to the bar asking if we had seen the groom as he was needed for some photographs or cutting the cake. Can't quite remember. None of the staff had seen him, so she went outside, only to return a few minutes later in tears. She had caught the groom getting with the maid of honor, her sister. All-out family war commenced with extra guests just sitting there enjoying the buffet. Worst part was hearing the bride cry, "I can't believe this happened again." I really felt bad for her because she was lovely. A man got very drunk, managed to break into the caretaker's shed, steal some keys, and began driving the ride-on lawnmower around the rear gardens. He ended up being asked to go to bed after 4 members of staff chased him, and one managed to dive and grab the keys. I have more, but I'm at work and can't type them out right now. I was working on a bar with my friend/colleague. I had a depressed 20-something-year-old man crying his eyes out saying he loves his girlfriend, but he's scared she's going to leave him or find someone better. He's laying out his whole life story saying about all the sacrifices he has made for her and how he's worked so hard to put a roof over their head, etc. My friend at the other end of the bar was talking to a girl about how her boyfriend sucked and how many times she had cheated on him, as well as hitting on my friend asking if there was anywhere private they could go. You guessed it, they were boyfriend/girlfriend. They were both so drunk they didn't realize they were within 10 feet of each other, even with my friend staring at each other. I didn't have the heart to tell the boyfriend what she was saying. A kid got a cake when no one was looking and licked the icing off. It had to be rotated for all photographs, so you couldn't see any of the nice and expensive decoration down the front. an elderly guest and relative of the bride, stopped breathing during the speeches. However, no one noticed for a few minutes due to the ongoing speech. The whole event was put on hold as she was carried into the bar area and an ambulance called. She began breathing again, but couldn't move and could barely speak. The ambulance came and took her away, with the bride's mother and another member of the wedding party. There were no more speeches, so the food was served straight away. The whole night went by really slowly, and even into the night too, with the DJ trying his best. No one was in the mood to dance/party. That was until around 9 PM when the bride's mother returned confirming the elderly guest was absolutely fine and will make a full recovery. I've never seen a gig go from dead to let's get hammered so quickly. The night too was coming to a close of a very big/fancy/expensive wedding when the groom, who was a GM of the hotel and also happened to be absolutely smashed, said that someone was coughing up blood and to call an ambulance. Due to being drunk, instead of calling straight away using the hotel phone, I offered to call one from my mobile whilst he took me to the guest in question as I had some first aid training. Not that I was going to be much help, just wanted to confirm the emerge before blindly calling 999. He refused to show me and said that when someone is coughing up blood you call an ambulance no matter what. He grabbed the phone and called it in himself. The ambulance arrived, medics went upstairs, came down a while later, then left. The groom barely spoke to me after that. Fun. We had a wedding where the groom was high up in the Navy, so of course his best man and all the groomsmen were also in the Navy. The night do started and they all got out their own bottles of liquor and put them on the table. Of course, this isn't allowed, so I went over and asked them to take them to their rooms. They can do what they want up there, but in the venue they can only consume drinks purchased at the bar. All were fine with his other than one guest. A 5 feet tall, 5 wide lad who thought he was the biggest guy in there. He essentially told me to go fuck myself and that he'd do whatever he wanted. I said fair enough and walked away. As soon as he left the table, I confiscated his alcohol, 1L bottle of Smirnoff vodka, and informed my manager. The bottle was put in the beer cellar under lock and key in a designated safe kept specifically for Thai kind of thing. Within 5 minutes he was at the bar demanding to speak to me. I greeted him, informed him of the situation, and that he could have his vodka back in the morning upon departure. He started kicking off, asking me to go outside etc, etc. He then attempted to grab me over the bar, but I stepped back, so he couldn't reach. I called my manager who just said don't serve him, leave him there. Helpful. So then for the next 3 hours he sat opposite the bar waiting for me to leave, despite protests from the wedding party, including the bride/groom themselves. At the end of the night we had a gentleman who refused to leave the main hall. We asked him to nicely leave and offered to call him a taxi, but he just kept saying he was fine where he was and we could fuck off. Eventually we managed to get out of him that he was staying in the hotel. Fine. He can go to the residence lounge. Nope. He was fine where he was. By now it was 2/3 AM and the night porter needed to set up for the next day, but couldn't do so with this guest sat there. At one point he passed out/fell asleep. So we took this opportunity to carry him to the residence bar. Great idea apart from him waking up halfway there, only to start kicking and throwing punches whilst shouting out we were assaulting him. After we backed off, he told us to fuck off one more time before walking towards the stairs, presumably to bed. I helped the night porter clean/set up, then went to go and leave myself. On the way I saw some legs from the top of the stairs. Turns out it was our friend from before, who had completed passed out now. I couldn't wake him, so I took his ID out his wallet, searched the system for his room number, carried him there, and left him on the bed. The next morning I happened to be working the breakfast shift. He came down, didn't recognize me, and demanded a glass of water. I gave him it, and asked how his night was. He just said fucking awful, and walked off. Professional singer here. I was asked to sing at the wedding of an old friend about 10 years ago. The ceremony rehearsal and subsequent dinner was great fun, and I had a good time meeting all the fun people in this huge, elaborate wedding party. A cute groomsman caught my eye, and, after getting super drunk at the rehearsal dinner, we stumbled back to my apartment that was a few blocks from the restaurant and hooked up. He was totally hot and very fun, and we had great chemistry, considering we had never met before. He didn't stay the night, which was fine by me, and we didn't exchange numbers or anything. That morning, as we were all getting ready for the ceremony to start, he took me aside and said, "So, you're gonna be cool, right? Because my fiancé is here." I was horrified. Not wanting to ruin my friend's wedding ceremony with a spectacular drama fest, I kept quiet until the reception, where I got super drunk, and, thereby, lost all my decorum. I'm 6 years sober last month. I hand wrote a note on the back of a program, and gave it to the fiancé, before I wobbled back home. I later heard there was crying, screaming, and punching. I worked at a wedding reception for 4 years and boy do I have a lot of stories. However, I'll try to condense it down. Probably the one that was the most fucked up. Bride and groom are middle-aged with a few kids already, one being an 8-year-old boy. Towards the end of the night, we witness the groom and the father of the children beating the shit out of a guest. After breaking up the fight, we learn that this guest had attempted to molest the young boy, son of the groom, in the bathroom. It was the worst thing we have ever experienced there, and I felt terrible for the kid and the parents. We had to hide the man, because the guest literally wanted to hurt him, but regardless of what we thought, we couldn't let that happen. So the guy's in our office area where I'm working, and he is with the woman he came there with, and judging from the nature of their conversation I gathered that this was not the first time he had acted inappropriately towards a kid and she seemed to just accept it. I was seething, and it ended up going to court. We gave statements. We had a wedding cancelled a few days before due to cheating. They still hope to get a refund. The obvious pants splitting. The groom needed an emergency set of pants after splitting them just before the ceremony. A lot of fights have happened. People getting drunk and angry is too common. From what we gathered, there was animosity between two halves of the groom's family, and it ended with a huge fight between brothers and uncles in the car park. Someone's grandma had a heart attack mid-reception and had to be taken to hospital. I wasn't working that weekend, thank the Lord, but bride asks for money only as wedding presents. During dancing, she sneaks over to the basket full of the envelopes and opens them up, counting her take. It's less than she hoped, so she calls the police, gets the DJ to stop the music, and accuses the waitstaff of stealing her gifts. Lines up the guests, asks each one publicly how much they gave her, screams at the police when they arrive to do something, sues the restaurant, or at least was threatening to when I stopped working there. I used to help out at my church with weddings, and I had the cutest drama ever. 2 little boys were ring bearers, and it was time for them to walk down the aisle and the littler one, probably 3 years old, just stood there. His older brother, probably 5 years old, nudged him to go, and the little one turned around and pushed him back, so the older one pushed him on. They fought and wrestled and pushed each other the whole way down the aisle. I found that hilarious. I'm not so sure the bride did though. I work at a wedding venue in the UK. I started as just working in the office doing accounts, and one weekend I offered to help on the bar when someone called in sick. 2 years later, and I now run the bar and or host for basically every wedding we have. 2 incidents come to mind. Elderly guests quite often struggle with everything going on at a wedding, and we had one have a heart attack and collapse as she was walking her daughter down the aisle. Made for a very difficult rest of the day for everyone, as one can imagine. My favorite incident, however, wasn't actually a wedding. A guy hired out the venue to celebrate his mum's 80th birthday. A casual Sunday afternoon in the countryside, with the majority of the guests being 60 plus. The guy's children were there and were struggling for entertainment with the immense level of elderly company. The guy's son, who was 13, was clearly so bored that in an attempt to liven things up he thought he'd do a couple lines of cocaine in the men's toilets, in full view of myself as I was walking in. I promptly made his dad aware of the situation, and I will never forget hearing the words, "I've told you to take it easy on the coke around your dad's family," as his mother arrived to take him home. Rather worrying that it sounded as though a 13-year-old doing cocaine was a regular occurrence. Worked as a bartender for 30 weddings summer after college. One time a cake was brought in from over an hour away right before people started arriving. It was one of those super fancy ones, probably 5 layers each with space in between them. 2 guys carried it in and put it on a table and the whole thing slid off and was ruined. Bride had a meltdown, but apparently they had a backup cake and the guys went back and got it, but it wasn't as nice. Another time bride cried in front of me. At the place I worked they always did a custom special drink that the bride/groom picked out for like the first hour, but usually the bride and groom are still taking pics. She asked me for one, but we were all out, and she got upset then started crying. Felt pretty bad, but really couldn't do anything about it. I used to be a receptionist at a private club that often hosted weddings. My desk sat in the lobby where the bridal party would line up to make their entrance into the fancy wedding hall. Once, the bride and groom were having an argument in front of all the groomsmen and bridesmaids. Maybe 16 people. Not sure what started it, but they were both hammered, and she was screaming "Fuck you, you piece of shit." And he was saying he wouldn't be such a piece of shit if she didn't act like such a C****nt. She was bringing up past arguments. He was talking trash about her in front of her to the groomsmen. It was a mess. The music was starting, and they were supposed to make their grand entrance any second now. I thought for sure they were about to call off the wedding. This fight was so intense and mean. Finally the maid of honor pipes in and says maybe they should all start getting in position. The bride screams, "Everyone shut the fuck up, this is my fucking day, don't fucking ruin it." I kid you not. On cue, they all straighten up, put on beautiful smiles, and walk arm in arm through the door, as if nothing had happened and everything was perfect. It was like something out of a robot flick. This was 2013, and I still think about them, and wonder if they're still married. I sing in a wedding band and we always get requests for the first dances. The most unusual one was a mother/son dance, groom and mom. The song requested was "The Lady is a Tramp"